Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all joining us on Zoom and Facebook Live for Green Hope Foundation's site event at the United Nations Ministerial Thematic Forums for the High-Level Dialogue on Energy, where we will be discussing how we can build back better through clean energy solutions. My name is Gahakasha. I am the founder and president of Green Hope Foundation, and I'm delighted to be your moderator for today's side event. My colleague, Erin, Outreach Officer of Green Hope Foundation, will be live tweeting our event. Before we begin, I would like to inform our audience that you can post your questions in the Q&A box on Zoom, the comments section on Facebook Live, or click the raise hand button on Zoom during the Q&A session after our panelists give their remarks. Now, since the mid-18th century and the advent of the Industrial Revolution, human society has been predominantly powered by fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas, whose extraction and usage has grown exponentially with time. And at every stage of this process, there are indelible negative impacts on the environment, much of it going unnoticed till very recently, with most people shrugging them off as minor pitfalls on the way to progress. Only now, faced with the intense impacts of climate change, species degradation, and the large-scale pollution of air and water sources and the consequent impacts on human health, have we woken to the fact that we can no longer continue to exploit fossil fuels without harming the planetary balance and our future well-being irrevocably. Alternate clean technologies have existed for decades, and many of these have now matured to the stage where these have become commercially viable. However, the largest challenge lies in dismantling the existing economic and social infrastructure that has been built around the fossil fuel industry over the last 300 plus years. As environmental crusaders, we would love to close them now, but then we would be without power, without food, without transport. Our schools, hospitals, offices, parliaments would all shut down, especially in the developing world where the dependence on fossil fuels is even more. What should have happened is a faster and well-planned transition process put into action decades ago. And that is exactly what we need to push for right now. Now that we're all chorusing the call for rebuilding better from the pandemic. The tremendous human suffering caused by the pandemic has really brought out this sense of empathy that had been gravely missing in our psyche. And, there's an increased political and corporate will now to support a transition to sustainable people and planet first growth drivers. So what should be the steps that we take? What needs to be prioritized? How can we ensure that developing nations are supported in this transition? These are some of the questions that we'll seek to find answers to today in our side event. Green Hope Foundation is pleased and indeed honored to have in our midst today an extremely erudite and accomplished panel of experts whose experiences and insights we'll seek today on how to facilitate the just transition to clean and renewable energy while focusing on nature-based and clean energy solutions to create a new normal. With that, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Ms. Maria Fernando Espinoza, former President of the United Nations General Assembly, former Minister of Foreign Affairs and of Defense, Ecuador. Ms. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Kekashin. As always, it's such a privilege and a joy to be with you, to be with your team, and with such distinguished panelists. And thank you for having me once again in this time to discuss about the climate crisis and the need for a true global ecological transition. And in this process, of course, as you very well stated in the opening, clean energy solutions have a critical role to play. First of all, I know that we are all aware of the dimension of the climate crisis. It is indeed one of the biggest challenges of the 21st century. And the signs that we are, is that we are unfortunately approaching a point of no return in climate change. Perhaps if we do not act now, moving towards an ecological and civilizational catastrophe, which is not what we want as a species, as humanity. And the data, the scientific information is really not very promising. The past 5 years have been the warmest in record. The average global temperature for the period 2016-2020 reached about 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And according to the World Meteorological Organization, there is about 40% chance of the annual average global temperature reaching 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels in the next 5 years. So really, this is not what we would like to hear. And it is unfortunate that it seems that if we do not change dramatically our development path, we will be in a situation in a point of no return. And if we see the IMO information, it's telling us that we are already in the temperature goal of the Paris Agreement, which according to the scientists is even, the threshold to stave off the worst impacts of climate change. So government pledges under the Paris Agreement that we know as the nationally determined contributions are still largely insufficient. Don't for a moment think that if we deliver on the Paris Agreement, we will have then an ideal situation. Not even, because it is still insufficient. According to the 2020 UNEP emissions gap report, the world is still heading for a temperature rise in excess of 3 degrees Celsius this century, even if all NDCs are fully implemented. And yet again, these are not good news. But what to do to change these trends? The level of ambition in the Paris Agreement must be tripled to reach the 2 degrees Celsius pathway and increase at least 5-fold for the 1.5 degrees pathway. So the goal is immense, is huge, but basically, what is the role of clean energy in this scenario? Clean energy is therefore a central piece of the solution. According to the World Resources Institute, energy consumption is by far the biggest source of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions, and it's responsible for 73% worldwide. So within the energy sector, generation of heat and electricity is responsible for the 30% of total greenhouse emissions, followed by transportation, 15%, and manufacturing and construction with 12% of total emissions. So there is a lot to do in the realm of sustainable energy and renewables. I think that these 3 last sectors that I mentioned are the fastest growing sources of green gas emissions since the 90s. And I refer to transportation and to basically the building and infrastructure, manufacturing and construction. So with these numbers in mind, I think it is important that the international community takes decisive action in advancing towards a global matrix of sustainable energy, and take this very seriously. The positive effects of a transition to green energy, are incredible. According to UNDESA, the division of the UN Division for development, the right energy efficiency policies could deliver over 40% of the emission reductions needed to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. And the renewable-based energy solutions and energy efficiency and the measures we take over that can potentially achieve 90% of the energy-related carbon reductions by 2050. So the discussion we're having today, it's absolutely critical to phase out the climate crisis. But what is happening in the clean energy transformation world? And I think that in spite of the need to take decisive action to maintain the increase of the temperature to 1.5 degrees, we are witnessing, and I would say with dismay, that governments around the world are failing to deliver on clean energy solutions. And here again, a UN Environment Program study published just last March mentioned that on the COVID-19 related fiscal rescue and recovery packages from the 50 leading economies reveals that the world is falling short in the efforts of building back better, more sustainably. You mentioned Kekashin, that this spirit of solidarity, of empathy has emerged with the COVID-19. And I hope that this is also reflected in the decisions we make and in the investments we make in the future. And with all these trillions of dollars in recovery packages, only 18% of the global recovery spending in 2020 could be considered as green investments. And this means that of the 1.9, close to $2 trillion devoted last year to long-term economic recovery, only 3.5% has been invested in low carbon energy, 4.5% in green transport, 1.8% in green building upgrades to increase energy efficiency, and 3% in ecosystem regeneration initiatives and reforestation, which mean nature-based solutions. So I think that the UNEP report is without a doubt an eye-opener and shows that global green spending is being incommensurate with the scale of the ongoing environmental crisis. So we cannot have more of the same. Non-electricity end-use sectors such as heat, cooling, transport are lagging far behind. Annual efficiency improvements are projected to reach only 2% by 2030. And this, of course, it's far short of the 3% needed to achieve the target of SDG 7 on climate. So what is the solution? I think that it is critical that we look at the root causes of climate change. I keep saying that climate change is not a problem, but a symptom of a dysfunctional relationship between the economy and nature and politics and leadership and decision making. So if we are to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement, we need to go seriously through a green energy, and this is needed, but perhaps not enough. A wider implementation of energy efficient policies and renewable energy are important climate mitigation actions. That's without a doubt. But in the long term, they will also not be enough to avoid an ecological catastrophe. What the world truly needs is to address the roots of the climate crisis, and these lie in our prevalent development model, as mentioned before. So climate change mitigation and adaptation policies might be complemented with a profound change in our patterns of production and consumption and address the many global inequalities. The multilateral response to the climate crisis has to be all-encompassing and take into account the health crisis, the inequality crisis. So in this sense, I think that we need to advance towards a new social contract between governments, the state, society, the economy, and nature. And this fact, I think, can become a reality if we look at seriously at the process of agreeing on a new global pact for the environment. A component of this new form of relationship between humans and nature is a sort of a Green New Deal that UNCTAD, of course, has worked so much on, and there is a landmark report of UNCTAD that perhaps we will hear later on the Green New Deal of 2018, and in which, of course, the processes of nature that sustain life on Earth are fully recognized and valued. So I think that this change in economic thinking starts by ending the notion that the damage provoked on the world's ecosystems are externalities to economic activity. It also implies rethinking our current market-based strategies for fighting climate change. They haven't proved to be efficient by themselves, carbon markets, et cetera, et cetera. Take, for example, the market mechanisms to control CO2 emissions. They are designed on the principles that emissions must be first created in order to recognize the value of removing them from the atmosphere. It doesn't make much sense. I think that they follow the prevalent economic notion that wealth is created by using or overusing our commons, including the atmosphere. The precautionary principles, change in production and consumption patterns are critical. So let me conclude, Kekashin. The message today is that we need to advance in all fronts at the same time if we are to tackle the climate crisis, protect Mother Earth, and survive as a species. And when I say all fronts, the technological fronts, the leadership and governance front, the production and consumption patterns as well. As consumers, we do have the power to change things, literally the power. And for that, I think that we need a whole different development paradigm based on the principles you laid out at the beginning, based on solidarity, on shared responsibilities, and the recognition that a healthy, well-functioning planetary system on which a stable climate and all human civilizations depend is our most valuable common heritage. And we need to embrace it. We need to defend it because it's a matter of survival. We don't have the choice anymore. And with that said, back to you, dear Kekashin, and again, very, very pleased to be here with you today.
Thank you so much, Maria, Miss Maria. And you're right. If we do not dramatically change our development path, we will be at a point of no return. We're already fast approaching that. And you're right, as consumers, we have the power to bring about change, and clean energy being a central piece of the solution. And the current market economy strategies have always been seen as something that is so necessary for growth and development. And now we need to reevaluate what even the growth and development means, because if we do not take care of our planet and do not adopt that people and planet-centered approach, then our market economy is not going to be able to help us in growth and development. So thank you once again. And with that, I shall invite our next panelist, Mr. Raymond Landfeld, Economic Affairs Officer, New York office of the UNCTAD Secretary General. Raymond, over to you.
Thank you, Kekashin, and thank you for the invitation. I have a presentation, so I'll be setting it up. It's not easy to follow after the former president of the General Assembly, but I will try. She was, very comprehensive in the presentation, touching on all the issues, but maybe somewhere I may be able to add. So the presentation by Maria, ex-President of the General Assembly, has linkages with some of the things that I'm going to say, and we can take from, for instance, the SG Guterres, who was just reappointed Friday, and he sent out his vision statement, for the next 5 years. And one of them is making peace with nature and climate. So the issues of carbon neutrality and the fight against biodiversity and ecosystem loss, air and water pollution is going to be also centerpiece in his view and for the next 5 years. So in preparing to make this intervention, I looked at the research that we did. We produced a paper, UNCTAD New York office, with support from 2 Yale students, to comparing how in 2008 and 2020 in selected 21 countries and the EU, the stimulus packages have been, like deployed in SDG sectors. And we selected 3: SDG 2, sustainable agriculture and food security, 5 on gender equality and the empowerment of women, and 7 on, affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. I think in this context, it's also interesting to look at the 2020 SDGs report, because it gives a picture of where we are with SDG 7. And like in our report, in the SD reports, there are some encouraging signs on what is happening on the modern energy front. The growth is not as, at the pace as we would like it to be. You could see here some data that I, extracted from these reports, where you could see that in 2018, we had 780 million people without electricity. And that's an improvement, because like 2 years ago, it was at 1.1 billion people. But still, in relation to the topic of rural communities, you could see that 85% of people without access to electricity are living in the rural areas. And that's a big challenge. Also, it's like in least developed countries and Africa issue as well, because you could see here from the data in those reports that Sub-Sahara Africa has, of those 780 million, 540 million are living there. The encouraging sign is the fall in solar and wind and those. So you could see as well, in line with what Maria Fernando was saying, the connection between SDG 7 and other SDGs. It's, you could say, with all SDGs, but it might be easy to pick some which are more easy, like with industry, innovation, and infrastructure, but also with poverty and with health. So there are some implications, although there was this, like, going in the right direction with energy because of COVID-19. A survey in Africa and in 6 Africa and Asian countries is showing that a quarter of the health facilities, were not electrified. And another quarter of them, they suffered, unscheduled outages and so on. So, with damage to equipment and so on. So that's a big challenge in regard to the rural areas and the poorer countries in regard to energy. This is also a picture of where we are, to state the challenge a bit more, like the growth that we were talking about to reach SDG 7 by 2030, how steep that the climb should be if we are about to make it. But, making the case again that this is an issue for, solving it in the least developed countries. This is taken from the Least Developed Countries Report 2017 of UNCTAD, which focused primarily on energy, and it is based on transformational energy access by promoting the fact that energy for social and household purposes is very important, But you know, if you look at the cost and the challenges, it might be good to combine it with thinking about productive and income generation activities. You know, because that can help to make the cost. So this is another challenge in the clean energy use, especially for women and children, where there is very slow progress in cooking fuels. That still 2.3 billion people are still without clean cooking fuels, you know, and it most impact women and girls, this type of pollution. Like I said, there are some encouraging signs in international financing for renewable energy, but again, that it only a fraction of that of the resources go to the poorest country. In 2017, there was $21.4 billion dollars going to renewable energy, which is an increase, and it's going to, you know, hydropower, solar, geothermal, but only 12% of that 21.4 billion is going to least developed countries. So there needs to, in the solution, there needs to be the attention on how to reach the least developed countries and you know, the rural communities. Here are some of the factors that help in the success of this technology. You know, it has to do with cost and affordability, finance, technical maturity, what Kakashan was referring to. So I will not dwell too much on these technical aspects. Here another some of the market issues that are in play. You know, one challenge though is that when we're talking about using market-based solution, trade and so on, that it's good to promote you know, clean energy and environmental friendly production. But we have to also recognize the challenges for developing countries to not make it a trade barrier, a non-tariff trade barrier that, you know, these countries cannot produce because they have not produced making use of the latest technology, which are not available to them. So those are the challenges when we want to connect, you know, green development within the growth and development and the economy. I understand that Alexandros is going to talk about some of the projects that he's doing, so I may not need to spend so much time in talking about, you know, how you know, standalone solutions can be connected to the grid and so on. But these are some of the issues that play to make it more inclusive. So if this is a picture of how energy is being used, and you can see some of the challenges here. You know, the use amount of traditional biomass that is still being used in some of the countries in the developing world, and which we need to find a solution for. This is when we talked about transformational energy access. This is the picture in least developed countries in 2017, and there you could see the difference with like the OECD countries, whereby you see energy used in LDCs is like 66% for household purposes, while in the OECD it's 19%. But if you look at the industrial sector, then you see it's only 15%. And in the OECD it's 31%. And also in other sector. In transportation, in LDC it's only 13%, while in the OECD it's 34%. So these are the challenges. How do we turn this picture that more energy is being used for productive and income generation activities, so we can help expand the use for social services for household, healthcare, and education. When we're going into the direction of solutions, I've seen this movie on Netflix, and I liked it very much, of the boy who harnessed the wind. And you could see with frugal technology, with his father's bike and some scrap metals he finds somewhere, building this wind turbine that could give them a second harvest, during the dry period. And the fact that they could go on and build more wind and then provide drinking water and so on. So that's the idea, but we cannot leave it to this. We cannot leave it to the geniuses and people to do it with scrap metals. And so there needs to be a more structural way of supporting these community level activities. So in that sense, I'm taking from the 2017 LDC's report of UNCTAD, where these 4 types of strategies are proposed, that the electricity systems need to be strengthened. Electricity need to be, the governance and finance of it need to be addressed and need to be integrated in development strategies. And B, the international cooperation, especially when it comes to financing and resources, but also, issues like IPR and open source technology that could be available to these countries to use, because the technologies are there. They may be too expensive to acquire. So here are some key findings and messages on the fact that renewable energy can also deploy and create income generation opportunities. It can help with gender equality issues and health and fighting climate change. And that because of different development pathways, there is also need for different renewable energy pathways. Some will have more potential for hydropower, some for geothermal, some more wind, some more solar. So you need a good policy mix. In international cooperation, we look at North-South, but there are also Southern solutions that other Southern countries can help other Southern countries in with the technologies that they may have already developed. So a couple of big ticket with which I would like to conclude. This year we'll have the COP again, and it's good if that occasion is used to remind that in 2009 there was agreement to spend from last year every year 100 billion to support developing countries, to mitigate and adapt to climate change. And to realize it now, it has been 12 years that this promise has been made. Is right about time that it materialized now, and maybe it would be good in the design to make specific allocations to these developed countries, small island developing states, and even rural communities and municipalities. And I take from that, from my previous life, I was the Global Environment Facility Small Grants Program National Coordinator in Suriname. And until now, when I meet UNDP resident representatives, they tell me that the Small Grants Program is the face of the UNDP in the country, because it works at community level. When you talk about environment and so on, the people understand it by the projects that have been implemented in their communities. So it would be a good thing that the Global Environment Facility, but also the Green Climate Fund, make space for small grants program and small grants type community level type activities. And I think in general, international support should be there in LDCs and rural communities to support education and skills building in science, technology, engineering, and math. Hence the boy that so we can have more boys that can harness wind and other type of energy. So, and in general, I am in support of more to increase investment, smaller scale and community operable wind, solar, micro, pico hydropower generation, combined with transformational energy access so that it can stimulate local production and income generation activities to help also pay for household and social utilization of energy, including healthcare and education. So that has been my presentation. And again, I thank you um, for your attention. And here are some of the sources that I have used to make this presentation. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Raymond. And the statistics you shared that 82% of people in rural areas and LDCs have no access to electricity, but only 12% of international financing for renewable energy actually reaches the LDCs. And we even have commitments made at conferences like COP, like 12 years ago, that committed to helping out LDCs in this transition to clean energy, but it's not been well, they've not fulfilled that promise. So that's really horrifying and sad. And I think like the pandemic, as we all know, has opened our eyes a lot more to these inequalities. And it's our hope that we can move forward and ensure that these promises that were made so long ago are fulfilled and we are able to reach the farthest first. So thank you once again. With that, I would like to invite our next panelist, Professor Alexandros Karalambides, Associate Professor and Head of Chemical Engineering Department, Cyprus University of Technology, and EIT Climate KIC Cyprus Hub Coordinator. Alex, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to speak today, and thank you to Maria and Raymond for their speeches so far. I would like to focus more about some concrete work we do in Cyprus based on all the data that Maria and Raymond shared. And I especially liked one of the conclusions of Raymond, that the pathway each country has to follow differs based on the local context. I don't know how many of the participants to today's webinar knows about Cyprus. So allow me a few minutes first to say a few things about Cyprus. Cyprus is a very small island. It's part of the European Union. It's in the Mediterranean Sea. We are less than 1 million individuals, and the whole area of Cyprus is less than 10,000 square kilometers. Even though we're part of the European Union, when it comes to research and innovation and the adaptation of new technologies, we're quite behind. And again, in the case of Cyprus, we have no wind, we have very limited biomass, we have no waves, we do not have the potential for hydro energy, and all we have basically is solar energy. We are very famous for our sun and our beaches, so I would like to welcome you all to come over for holidays in Cyprus. But joking aside, as an island, we are not interconnected to anything. So we cannot import electricity from other countries when we're in need. And neither we can export our supply of energy. And in the same way, more what Raymond again said, we rely a lot on transportation. 40% of our energy is on transportation. So when you consider all of that, and based on the work we did, you can see that for us, storage and the management of the electricity, it's something of the uppermost importance. The work we do as the Climate Kick Hub in Cyprus is how to transform the island into an island, a carbon neutral island, so that we rely 100% on renewable energy sources. And that limits us a lot because we have to focus a lot on the management of the grid and on storage. And even though we're a well-off island, but we are not as rich as maybe Germany or in the USA. So we cannot easily adapt their technologies. So we cannot say, Germany did this, we will import it in Cyprus. And again, it's the same way when you want to transfer technologies to Africa or to rural Asia, it's not so easy to adapt the technologies. So a lot of the work we do is on energy communities. And if you're not familiar with the term, it's basically how can we bring houses, industry, government buildings, and the local transportation as a community, as a whole, to share the electricity in a group. So the photovoltaic of this house produces, but it's being used by the factory of this person. This factory produces excess heat, we can transfer it to this high school, and so on. So you can understand this has to do with policy, because currently this is not allowed in a few countries, well, a lot of countries actually. It has to do on financing, so sometimes the banks needs to involve and so on, and also comes to the technologies. What technologies can be used in order to enable this whole process. The other kind of project we have, which again relates to storage, is combined with desalination. Cyprus has always been hot. We always had problem with rainwater, but due to climate change, every year this becomes more severe. So it rains a lot less, and when it rains, it pours. So it floods everything. So most of the water just runs back to the sea, basically. So we have some projects. Actually, the name of this project, sorry, I'm a bit, you can hear me, I'm a bit stuffy, so apologies for my voice. It's called the Prodias Project, which is basically collecting the sun rays in order to produce desalinated water, so that we do not connect it on the electricity directly, all the sunlight that, transform to electricity or to heat and then use it for the grid, or indirectly, we use it to desalinate water and use that as a backup. And the one other project we do, just to see the complexity of how you can do things, it's historic buildings. I don't know if this is relevant maybe to rural areas, but to Central Europe, a lot of the buildings are historic ones. So you cannot automatically change them. You cannot put double glazing windows. You cannot change the roof. So one of the projects we work with is how can you adapt historic centers of cities, of Rome? How can you change Rome and make that carbon neutral city? It's not so easy as building new cities in China or in Abu Dhabi and so on. So I will conclude, so I will leave a lot of time for discussion. When you want to focus in your own country, the first thing you need to do, there is a methodology in Europe, it's called Smart Specialization Strategy. So you can have a look about it. So basically, when you go in your country, you need to see what do you have there? What are the resources you have, what you're lacking? Then you have to see what you're good at. And then you can combine these two in order to start finding solutions. And of course, you need to see where the trends are going. You're not going to invest in batteries or in storage when the whole world is going in another direction. And basically, that's some examples of what we do in Cyprus. And hopefully others can find it useful for their own countries. So thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Alex. And you bring up some really important points. First of all, thank you for sharing the work that you are doing in Cyprus that is, specific to the needs and wants of your island country. And you're absolutely right. We need local solutions for local challenges, and that just because another country implements a solution doesn't mean it's going to work in some other country, because the resources present are different, the challenges are different. So thank you for speaking about that.
Thank you. Just one clarification, it's not work I do, it's of the academic and research community of Cyprus. I don't do all of that.
But it impacts everyone. And I think Cyprus is an excellent example of localizing the SDGs and working on the ground. And I really liked how you talked about the historical buildings and adapting them using addressing their specific challenges. I don't think that's been talked about a lot. So thank you once again. And that, with the localization, actually is a very nice segue to our next panelist, Ms. Anshita Hegde, Chapter Head of Green Hope Foundation, India. Anshita, over to you.
Thank you, Keksha. Good evening from India. It's an honor to be part of this amazing panel discussion. As a young person, I'm truly appalled that deep, developed, rich nations continue to increase investment in fossil fuels instead of accelerating the transition to clean energy. It is people in the third world, young people, women, the infirm, who suffer most from consequences of fossil fuel use. Whether it is from the accelerated impacts of climate change or acid rain, ocean acidification, or biodiversity loss, the entire fossil fuel process reeks of environmental injustice. We at Green Hope Foundation work on the front lines, trying to rebuild marginalized communities through clean energy mechanisms. If we as young people with such limited resources can drive this change, why can't rich governments do the same? It is a matter of political will and ground level action, and the onus is largely on us, young people, to build the momentum for this change. To echo what my fellow panelists have said, it is imperative that we work towards achieving Sustainable Development Goal 7, affordable and clean energy, and all its targets and indicators. As we come out into the new normal, it is even more imperative to ensure that this clean and renewable energy is affordable to the masses, especially in the global south, and not just something that is restricted to the rich elite of the developed world. We have seen over the years how the prices for solar, wind, and other renewable energy sources have dropped, but there still remains a lot to be done to make sure that renewable energy is able to power the lives of those who need it the most. It might seem difficult and expensive at first to move towards renewable energy, but the benefits far outweigh the costs. At the same time, we must not view the process of obtaining and distributing renewable energy through rose-colored lenses. We have to make sure that this dissemination does not happen at the cost of destroying parts of the global south, as is the case with fossil fuel extraction. Not many eco-friendly people, especially in the global north, are aware that most of the electric cars that they use are powered by lithium-ion batteries, whose materials continue to be extracted wantonly from the deserts of Atacama, destroying the environment of another place for their benefit. Or think about the dead batteries that have run out of power and their consequent waste disposal. If we truly want clean renewable energy, we must ensure that we do not substitute one problem with another. We must move away from this typical linear model of working and understand that renewable energy is about ensuring that no part of the renewable energy cycle of sourcing to waste siting harms the planet or people. Only then can we call our renewable energy clean. Another very important point to understand is that simply saying we must all move towards 100% renewable energy by 2030 is not enough. At Green Hope Foundation, we work on localizing the SDGs, including SDG 7, and we see firsthand on the ground how different forms of renewable energy must be utilized to meet the specific demands of that region and how it is connected to solving other challenges already faced by the community. This is exactly what we address through our grassroots actions at Green Hope Foundation. Over the last 9 years, we have been working tirelessly to educate people about the importance of clean energy and have undertaken long-term projects that positively impact the lives of our most vulnerable populations. Our ground level advocacy on clean energy began with our work in salt pans of India, the run of Kutch, which contributes to a large share of India's salt production. We distributed hundreds of solar lamps to families living in the Kutch and simultaneously educated them on clean energy practices and its benefits. The villagers had no source of light and their children often dropped out of school due to lack of this availability. The day we distributed the solar lamps was the first time the families had dinner under a source of light. The children were also able to study and played happily in the brightness of the light. The happiness on their face is beyond what words can explain. In Liberia, we installed a solar panel grid in a town that was previously without electricity. This had a severe impact on the education of the children, wherein they had to use flashlights to study at night for their exams, which many parents found difficult to afford. The lack of electricity also affected the everyday lives of the people living in the rural community who work all day and prepare meals at night. Thus, we installed solar panels in the community center. We also installed solar panels at homes as well as the schools of the town so that we can provide computer literacy to the girls in the evenings. Additionally, we installed solar street lights in this town. A lot of women face sexual harassment in the evenings due to there not being a source of light on the streets. And due to this fear, many prefer not to go out of their houses at night. These solar streetlights ensure their safety. The installation of these solar panels and the solar streetlights demonstrate how clean and renewable energy can benefit the lives of so many and help us progress in the achievement of so many other SDGs, addressing the linkage between SDG 7 and SDGs 4, 5, 13, 16, just to name a few. In the Sundarbans in Bangladesh, the world's largest mangrove forest, we forayed deep into the mangroves to distribute solar lamps to the local communities of this coastal environment. Since we distributed the solar lamps, the children in these villages now have light to study at night and also have some safety from tiger attacks when they venture out in the darkness. This World Environment Day, we installed solar street lights in a village in Bangladesh. Another country, another village, but the problem is the same. Women and girls need safe spaces, and that is what we are trying to provide. The people were jubilant to know about the concept of clean energy, and of course, the solar street lights will impact their lives tremendously. In Nepal, we distributed solar lamps to the women of an old age home and also in a village near Kathmandu, encouraging them to use these lights for the betterment of people and the planet. Green Hope Foundation works on education for sustainable development as a transformative tool. We know that without knowledge, we cannot take action. So we provide education on clean energy, teach the concerned communities about its benefits and how it helps them to mitigate climate change and is good for the planet and the people. We have been conducting workshops, academies, and conferences for all sections of the society, from young people, teachers, students, and to large corporates. We have continued our advocacy online during the COVID-19 pandemic as well, complementing our work on the ground. Currently, we are working on providing solar cookers in rural communities. We are also planning to provide a solar grid in Western schools in India. The energy industry is one of the largest contributors of greenhouse gas emissions. The responsibility lies more with the rich nations, the global north, to lead this transition. They have the resources, yet they continue to allow economic benefit to cloud their judgment. What we also need is more young people in positions of decision making, in parliaments, the governments, so that we can influence the clean energy agenda. Every day's delay is pushing us further towards an environmental meltdown. Very soon, the impacts might become irreversible. We will continue to fight for it. I call upon everyone who's tuned in today to join us in this movement. Our future well-being hinges on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anshita. First of all, thank you for sharing Green Hope Foundation's work and for bringing up some really important points, namely, again, echoing the interconnections amongst all of the SDGs, localizing them, but also how when we're implementing renewable energy solutions, we have to ensure it is truly clean in the sense that just to benefit one part of the world, it does not take away from the global south, as is the case with fossil fuels, and really move towards a more regenerative circular bioeconomy that has clean energy production at its core. So thank you once again. And thank you to all of our panelists for your remarks today. This has been so enlightening. And once again, I'd like to remind our audience that you can post your questions in the Q&A box in the Facebook live chat, or you can raise your hand on Zoom. And let me see. I do see some raised hands. So we have one right here. So Erin, do you want to take the floor?
Yes, thank you. My question is, fossil fuels like petroleum or coal are only available in a few countries, while solar power is available everywhere. So what prevents nations from tapping into what is available in plenty?
Very relevant question, panelists.
If I may answer first on this question, solar energy is free. Photovoltaic energy, though, is not. You still need to rely on importing all the material or all the devices, on the inverters, on the grid. So even that is not free. So I do agree with you that there should be more work on finding solutions, if not solar biomass, if not biomass wave. And I still do not know why countries are not all have a mandatory target of 100%. EU is doing their best. Other countries are doing the same thing. IMO is now doing the same thing with the shipping industry and the maritime. Honestly, I don't know why we're not pushing it further. But just to clarify, it's not free. It's better, but it's not free.
Other panelists? If no one else wants to take the question, then I shall move on to our next question. So our next question is from Tamhidul Islam. Tamhidul, we are promoting you to panelist. Let's see.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, panelists, for the amazing discussion. I'm Tamhidul from Bangladesh, and my question is, what are the main hurdles for LDCs in adopting clean energy?
Panelist?
So can you repeat that?
Yes, my question is, what are the main hurdles for LDCs in adopting clean energy?
So I think I may have to take this question because I have made the most my intervention included LDCs. I think it's the development part where they are, what resources are available. That's why I'm calling for more support and resources to LDCs. Starting with the 100 billion that was promised in 2009. Let's get that on the table, and let's help these countries to develop these kind of projects that they can have. So I think it's mostly the resources that they don't have. Yeah.
Well, yes, Ms. Maria.
Well, I would like, if you allow me, to respond to both the question posed by Erin and Tamidul at the same time. And I think that the world lives in a paradox, because we do have the technologies, we do have the resources. We know that fossil fuels are, generating, and coal are generating huge impacts. However, you have countries like my own, Ecuador. Our national budget depends on the international oil prices, but let's say from 40 to 55% of our national budget comes from oil exports. And this money is used for education, for health, for transfers to the poorest, and to keep the public goods and services operational. And there you face a reality shock, because what to do. And the truth is, it's not that we do not know what the solutions are. It is a question of perhaps a fairer international economic global order, and also something that I mentioned during my intervention, which is basically our economic logic works about, you generate the emissions, and then we try to do the checks and balances under a common but differentiated responsibilities, the NDCs, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that especially for climate, the principle, the precautionary principle, the not doing, it's extremely important. Especially I would encourage Erin to look at the Yasuni Initiative that came from Ecuador. when I was Minister of Foreign Affairs and then Minister of Culture and Natural Heritage. Basically, it was a call to the international community to compensate Ecuador for not exploiting its biggest oil reserves, because they were located in a World Heritage site, a national park of primary tropical rainforest in Ecuador. I said heritage site, no, it's a biosphere reserve, sorry. And basically we call the international community to compensate for not doing, for using what we call the avoided net emissions. And I think the world wasn't prepared. And I have to say with great sadness that the government and the president of Ecuador decided to go ahead and exploit that oil site. So the decisions, the political choices that you have to make are extremely complicated. And when you look at, the footprint in emissions, you see that countries like Tamido's countries or my own, they really contribute almost nothing, to the overall arithmetics of emissions. And but yet, we have to really decide how to go about the development needs we have. And this is even more profound of a challenge when you look about LDCs, the poorest countries of the poor. Ecuador and most Latin American countries are middle-income countries, and yet we face this kind of political choices that are very, very tough. So I think that in a way, the conversation needs to change, avoiding, and again, we were able, the Yasuni project didn't succeed, but we were able to introduce the concept of avoided net emissions in the climate negotiations. Of course, every time some countries, hear about avoided net emissions, they start shaking, because it's really a paradigm shift. But I think we need to continue with the struggle and not give up. Sorry about my long response to short and very very important questions. Back to you, Kekashan.
Thank you so much, Ms. Maria. And with that, we shall take our next question. Aliu, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I am Aliu Jekusa of Green Hope Foundation here, Liberia. Thank you, Atasha, for highlighting the so many ground level work that Green Hope Foundation continues to do in making sure that we achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. My questions is directed to all three of our panelists today, as we are quite aware that developing countries are lacking with the necessary infrastructure and technological innovation and political will. What system has been put in place by international institutions to keep up with the monitoring or system of whatsoever fund that have been donated to those developing countries?
Amazing. Thank you for the question, panelists. Yes, Ms. Maria.
No. I had a little bit of a problem listening to the questions, but perhaps if my colleagues would like to respond, Aliu, and if in short, if you would like to repeat, I had
Definitely. So with all of those problems, those systemic problems that developing countries are faced with, there are tons of contribution from international institutions. What are monitoring systems that have been put in place in making sure that funds release be used for the particular purpose?
Okay. I don't know if my colleagues want to respond, but Believe me, I've been part of climate negotiations for the last 15 years or perhaps more. And in Cancun, I think that was 2012, we agreed to establish the Green Climate Fund. And the industrialized world committed to put together $100,000, billion per year. And the establishment of the Climate Adaptation Fund. And if you go look in detail, the resources are not there as expected. So there is a big challenge in climate finance. Some say that we need more private funding. And I would say, yes, I agree. I think that the private sector has a very important role to play in new energy matrices, in a proper ecological transition. But the main responsibility lies in governments. And the climate convention, the basic principle of the climate convention is common but differentiated responsibilities. So I think that we really need to be serious. There is the net zero alliance from some countries, the commitments of the European Union to go carbon neutral by 2050, the commitment from China to go climate neutral by 2060. But I think that, and of course, this is critical, and we have the United States rejoining the Paris Agreement. But even then, if we do the arithmetics of climate change, we know that it is not good enough. So it has to be a combination of serious, accessible funding, especially for the developing world, and an increase in ambition of the original targets set in the Paris Agreement. We already know that the Paris Agreement was a landmark, was very important. I spent myself 2 weeks without sleep in Paris, trying to come up with that agreement. But we already know today that we are lagging behind, and the Paris targets are not good enough in the arithmetics of climate change. And for us, for the developing world, Raymond comes from the Caribbean, from Suriname. Let's look at the impacts like Tamidul's countries or Raymond's countries have to pay, because of the climate crisis, being victims, and the spillover effect of the negative spillover effect of climate change is huge, because it's not only putting in risk ecosystems but it's really putting under risk our species as humans. So the challenges ahead are huge. We would like to see more commitments, financial commitments, the multilateral banks being serious about the new lending conditions. And also, I share with you some numbers about the Building Back Better huge investments that we are doing worldwide. The recovery packages for COVID-19, how much of that is going to green investments and truly renewable energies, and really investing in a proper ecological transition in the developed world mostly. Look at the 50 biggest economies investing, less than 20% of their recovery packages in sustainable and green investment. So there is a long way to go, but it is feasible. We should not dismay.
If I may add in response to Aliyu, I hope I pronounce your name well. I've been a member of the Standing Committee on Climate Finance from 2012 until 2016. And our job was to, help come with solutions to make the financial mechanism of the Framework Convention on Climate Change to make it better. And a couple of things are being improved in regarding to what you're saying about the monitoring of the use of funds, because all countries, eligible countries and countries that get support, they have to send in their biennial reporting to the Secretariat. We look at it, but we also, as the Standing Committee on Climate Finance, negotiated and requested that also the donors need to send in a biannual report of the support that they give. So you can match. We've provided some guidance to the financial mechanism on how to improve, make the funds better, that more funds get to the countries then got stuck in the middle with consultants and all those. So there are some efforts, and I'll tell you that the negotiators from developing countries in climate are very, very strong. There's a very strong group that works to support the developing countries' interest, in climate change.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I am cognizant of time, so I'll quickly take the last question, which is directed to Anshita, and that's from Hitasha in our Q&A box. The immense cost of healthcare attributable to the pollution caused by fossil fuels needs to be calculated and publicized. Why is there so little focus on this, and what can be done to mainstream this?
That is a very valid question. Through our work on ground, we see first-hand links between health and clean energy, which Raymond also talked about in his presentation. I think the pandemic has opened our eyes to see how connected health is to all our SDGs, and we at Green Hope try to use education for sustainable development that turns into action to make the connection and ensure long-term sustainability, such as through our distribution of solar lamps, solar cooker stoves, etc. We talk about solar cook stoves being available to rural women in the Ldcs, but the reality is something completely different. So we need to raise awareness that turns into action now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anshita, and thank you so much to our audience for your extremely relevant questions. And with that, I'd just like to give our panelists 30 seconds to give your concluding remarks. So we shall go in reverse order. Anshita, the floor is yours.
Firstly, I would thank you for having me part of this amazing discussion. I've been enlightened with so much ideas, knowledge, information regarding the clean energy and its application. So I would just like to end by saying that transition to clean energy is an investment made for our future. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Anshita. Alex?
Yes, thank you again. I would like to say, as well as Sashita said, a carbon neutral world is possible. Technologically and economically, it is viable. We just need to find the right policy and the right agreements between each country, Europe and Asia, Africa and the US, whatever, to make it work. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you. Raymond?
Yes, I would say we need to make the efforts that the poorest countries, the LDCs, but also the rural communities, especially in middle income countries, get prioritized, and let's put the resources, especially the ones that have already been promised, let's put them on the table to support these countries.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Ms. Maria?
Well, I would say that these building back better efforts from the COVID-19 pandemic can be seen as a golden opportunity to not go back to the same old and really take seriously of the challenge and the opportunity we have to create a new normal. And this new normal has to be a reconciliation between humans, nature, the economy, and politics. And we need this new global pact for the environment to make it happen. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Maria, and thank you so much to our speakers, the audience, for such an engaging discussion. It is amply evident that the move to 100% renewable energy cannot just remain an aspiration. It is an urgent necessity, and the need is now even more critical for developing nations that can make them more robust, resilient, and people and planet centric. As our panelists have spoken about today, creating the infrastructure for this transition is one of our greatest challenges, and it will require political, corporate, and societal will. It has to be economically viable as well as profitable in a regenerative bioeconomy. Otherwise, it will remain an unfulfilled dream, with one section of civil society constantly demanding change while the powers that be just make the motions of change while maintaining the status quo. So the time is opportune to ensure a blueprint for transition, and this must be driven by multilateral institutions, maintaining transparency and engaging all stakeholders so that we are all partners in this progress towards 100% clean and renewable energy. Thank you so much once again. Please stay safe, take very good care of yourselves and your loved ones. Till we meet again, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you.